Hi, I'm Jeff Butler. This is Tom Giannotti with the Butler Law Firm, and we're going to talk today about a car accident case that Tom and I worked on that recently settled for $1.5 million. We'll go through it about like this. We'll first talk about the wreck, and then we'll talk about who was at fault, which was a little unusual in this case. Tom will expound upon that, and we'll talk about some insurance stuff. So this collision happened on I-75 South. And specifically, it occurred late one night when some folks were heading back from what had been a Braves game. So they're heading back from Truist Park here, and they're coming down 75, and the collision occurs right about in here, just outside North Atlanta High School. I think as they're approaching the Mount Parent exit. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it ended up being, it was an unusual collision, and there are two vehicles that it may have been racing. I mean, both were moving fast. We had a sports car and then another really nice fast car. And we could tell, pretty early on that these vehicles had been booking it, because here's the police report from the Atlanta Police Department. And it's not often that an officer writes anything even remotely colorful in their police reports, but here they did. The officer was interviewing witnesses there and concluded that, as you can see, one guy says that both vehicles were hauling tail, to use a different word than he did. So we knew things were going fast. The vehicles, as Tom will explain, it wasn't totally clear what happened out there, but somehow these vehicles sideswiped one another. We never got, the case actually settled pretty rapidly, so we never got complete pictures from the police department, who had some of this stuff under hold because they're considering a criminal prosecution. But we do have pictures of one of the cars. This is a Ford Mustang involved in the collision, and you can see that it's consistent with a sort of sideswipe collision that knocked one of the vehicles out of control. So Tom, tell us what we found out about who was at fault out there.
Yeah, so as Jeff alluded to, this is a little bit unusual. Normally in car accident cases, we're primarily going after one driver, one at-fault party. In this case, it was unusual in that we actually had two drivers that appeared to have at least some shared responsibility for this accident. And there was some dispute as to who was really primarily at fault, but it was interesting. This is really sad, but the decedent's boyfriend was actually driving her car. Very sadly, he actually was partly determined to be at fault by the police department, and he actually had given a recorded statement to the insurance company in which he talked about how this Ford Mustang that you just saw on the screen was basically driving really aggressively behind him, tailgating, revving his engine, kind of swerving tires back and forth like you might see a race car driver do behind a pace car or something. So sort of just generally aggressive driving. So he said that he felt pressure and that he was trying to go the speed limit, and this driver was just zooming around him in and out of traffic, and he just was just trying to maintain his lane. But then he says that he caught up to the vehicle, which it seems odd to us, at least, that the police report indicated, actually the arrest warrant indicated that they had reached speeds of in excess of 120 miles an hour. So it just didn't seem quite right there. So we always felt throughout this case, and I think the police did too, because the police charged both drivers, right, that both shared some responsibility. And as sad as that is for the family, but the other driver, the Mustang, had insurance as well as the insurance that covered the decedent's car, and so it kind of matters. The fact that two parties were kind of contributed to be at fault for this accident meant that there were two different insurance policies to deal with, and
two different insurance companies, right?
Well, oddly enough, it was the same insurance company, if you recall, but it's kind of weird because it's even more unusual than that. But that didn't really matter too much. I mean, it was, for all intents and purposes, separate policies. So But do you want to talk about insurance and
Yeah,
jump back
I
in?
will. Anytime you're dealing with a wrongful death case, particularly death of a young person like this, there's no amount of money can really equal a human life. Georgia seeks to obtain compensation under the Wrongful Death Act for the quote full value of the life, close quote, and of course you can never really reach that. In a case like this, a car accident case, often the real question is how much insurance can we find? Because most of the time the drivers aren't going to be sitting on large piles of cash, so that the amount of money our clients are able to recover is often governed by the insurance policy, which is why we look so hard for different policies. And here we were able to find 3 different policies, although they were all issued, I guess, by the same insurer. I'd forgotten that until time reminded me. But because we were able to demonstrate that both drivers were at fault, that meant that we were able to collect from the auto insurance liability policies of both drivers. I think they were both $250. Is that right?
Right. And then we learned about the excess or umbrella policy for
Right.
the Mustang driver. There was actually happened to be an umbrella excess policy on the decedent's car as well, but for reasons that are probably beyond the scope of this video, since most folks insurance coverage is a dry topic, for reasons that we won't go into, was not at issue in this case.
Yeah. So we ended up collecting from a total of 3 policies. One, the insurance liability on the Mustang. 2, the insurance liability on what was sort of our decedent's car. It wasn't actually, it actually belonged to a family member of hers, but that auto liability insurance coverage policy, and then an excess policy, which we were able to find on the Mustang in the amount of, I think, $1 million. So that brought us up to the total settlement of $1.5 million. That was available. Our clients decided to take it, and so the case ended.